Good morning, church. How are y'all feeling today? Good. It's so good to be with you. I'm excited. Would be lying to say I wasn't at least a little bit nervous, but we're feeling good. We're feeling good. You guys got like the loose me now. Okay, first service is like working out the kinks. Now it's just like I'm here. So if you're not familiar with me, my name is Brad. I've been here my whole life, but I've been here on staff for the past around 4.5 years. Was brought on as an intern back in December 2020, and been working with teens. And let me tell you what, working with teens, it comes with a lot of perks. Okay, for example, like we get to take our kids, we get to do a lot of fun stuff. We do Elevate and Encounter. That's our middle school and high school camp. And I mean, it's tiring. If you're a kid and you're a teen here, you're like, yeah, dude, I'm tired at the end of the week. Yeah, same. But we get to do a ton of like awesome things. We get to go to Dorney Park, Hershey, Sight and Sound, a lot of fun stuff. One of the things we also get to do is go to the beach. This is last weekend. We took our seniors just to celebrate them, say how much we love them and care about them and just how they've been involved in our youth ministry. And so we got to take them to Ocean City and just have a blast. I mean, we ate way too much pizza, had way too many donuts. I mean, we just got fat. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do on vacation. So we got to go to the beach. Well, do any of you like love going to the beach in the summer? Like it's like your thing, like, oh my word, we go to the beach, maybe go out in Florida, South Carolina, whatever it might be. Well, we grew up going to the beach too. We actually grew up going to Ocean City, but one of my favorites, okay, because I didn't always like love the beach because like, look at me, I go straight to red, like bad. I blister, it's terrible. One of the beaches I loved to go to as a kid though is Long Island, New York. We had family who had a beach house there. My mom, she was born and raised Long Island. My grandparents both grew up there. So we had family there. And so in the summertime, usually 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend, we'd go up and we'd go over to Long Island, New York. And I used to love spending time on this beach here. I mean, we get there and first thing they got, New York bagels, okay? Not your giant stuff. We're talking bagels, real stuff. So good. The cream cheese and then we throw swimsuits on and we go swimming and we go tubing. We go out into the bay. We take Uncle Dave's boat out and go fishing. I loved doing that. Also, just big shout out to Aunt Lynn. I went on your Facebook and got this picture, so thanks. But loved spending time on this beach. And I can remember this one specific time that we went out. It's at night, and like we'd have fun all day, and then at nighttime we'd go to that little area right there with the table, and there's this little fire pit, and we'd have a fire. And I remember one time sitting there, and my cousins were working on it, and they're building it, and they're putting the everything in the kindling, and they're trying to light it. And I think there's a little bit of trouble, like it's just not catching. Maybe it was like a little bit wet wood. Whatever was the case, they were having trouble starting the fire. So my cousin, he walks toward the dock, and I'm just like sitting there like loving life. I'm just like, oh, this is the best. And he walks, and he comes back, and he's like carrying either like a pail or a something, and then he just kind of goes over to the fire and just kind of starts splashing it. And it starts going up, and I'm like, whoa. Me as a kid, okay, I'm not 20, okay, I'm a kid, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's just some of that magic salt water, and he's just dumping it on there, and whoosh. Okay, now he was smart not to tell me that was gasoline because there was a possibility I was gonna end up looking like Pastor Chris or John, and I really don't wanna look like that yet. God, please, not yet. When you think about your life, when I think back on my opportunity here, what I get to do, that's what I picture myself as doing. I get to be here with middle school, with high school, and what I get to do is I help fan their flame. I'm dumping fuel on their fire. I'm helping to spark that passion for God. And that is something I love to do. I love when kids come up to me after a message and they're like, hey, I got a question about what you said. And they're like working through it. I love it when they tell me stories that, hey, this girl, she was really making fun of me at school, and I tell her, pray for her. And then weeks later, she's like, hey, did you know she's coming to church with me? That kind of stuff is just electric. And I get to help play just a small part in fueling their fire. When you think back on your own life, think about your past for a second. Who have been some of the spiritual influences in your life? These fire starters, these people who have lit your flame. When I think about history, I think there's a few key ones that maybe stick out to me. I know the first one is Billy Graham. Billy Graham is just such an impact. I mean, filling up stadiums of people to tell them about Jesus, and then having all these people come down to the field to ask Christ into their life. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing influence. I think of someone like Mother Teresa, right? And the life that she committed to Calcutta, India, and how she spent time with those kids, those orphans, People who were just thrown to the side and viewed as worthless, and she took them in and cared and loved for them. So much influence. I think of a more modern example, Cliff Knechtley. He's this guy who goes to college campuses, and he basically just gathers a crowd of students who just ask him faith questions. And it's awesome. And he sits there and he hears their stories and he hears their life experience, and he just explains the gospel in such a clear way. It's awesome, incredible influence. Well, in my opinion, one of the people who's probably had the most, or at least one of the most incredible amounts of influence is this guy, Paul. Paul is someone who's on fire for God. But crazy enough, he wasn't always though. He actually used to be a Pharisee who used to kill Christians. He used to kill the people who he became a part of. And so he goes and he has this experience with Jesus on the road to Damascus, and Jesus is like, what are you doing? Help me, don't hurt me. And he changes his life all the way around. And now he has one of the biggest influences in the spreading of the early church. A majority of the New Testament we have in our Bible is from Paul. I mean, that's going from one side of the spectrum to the next. And he had incredible influence, but not just on himself though, not just on necessarily these churches or these big places, but also a couple key individuals. You see, Paul, he took in a couple guys and really trained them on how to minister, how to share the gospel. And one of them was Timothy. Timothy was this kid, scholars think maybe late teens, early 20s when he first came on. And Paul, from what scripture tells us, played a pivotal role in his spiritual life, his spiritual development, kindling his flame, being a fire starter in Timothy's life. And look at what it says about Timothy. But you know Timothy's proven worth. How as a son with a father, he has served me well in the gospel. So he's coming alongside. It's about 16 years that they served together. So quite a long period of time. Paul and Timothy hand in hand, and they're serving together. And that is one of the reason why Timothy got to where he was, the reason why he got to speak and lead churches and help ignite fires is because of a fire starter in his life. You know, when Chris asked me to speak, he just told you about what my reaction was, which was authentic. I definitely remember having that conversation with Spencer and like, oh my word, like I loathe when he asks me to do that. And then it happened. And so then as I was trying to think, you know, God, what do you want me to say? What's the message you want me to give? I was just constantly sort of reminded of the influences in my life. Like I was thinking like, how did I get here? Okay, like how did I get here? Like speaking to a bunch of people, speaking to middle schoolers, working at a church. How did I get here? And as I think back on my life and my 28 long years, I think about all the people. I think about this church. I've been born and raised here. Actually, funny how God works. My office right now was the nursery where I'm told I used to scoot on my butt on the ground. And that's where my office is now. How did this happen? And this happened because fire starters. I had fire starters in my life who lit my flame, who gave me that initial spark, and then who just dumped fuel on my fire and encouraged me along in my faith journey. Something that I love to challenge our students with is living out their faith. Not just having a faith that's in their mind, right? Not just knowing the answers, not just going to Sunday school, not just knowing the books of the Bible, not just knowing the right things, but actually living it out. Living it out in the classroom, living it out on the bus, on your team, in your lunch table, and actually showing that there's a difference in you. And that's what I want to offer you guys today and challenge you with. I believe that if you're a follower of Jesus in this room, you are called to be an influencer. You're called to be a fire starter. Now that for you might look like a couple kids. That might look like a couple employees. Might look like a classroom. Whatever that circle of influence looks like for you, I believe God has called you to have influence. And so, church, I want to challenge you today, and we want to look at what Paul, this fire starter in the New Testament, what we can learn from his example, how we can inspire. So church, if you would, pray with me, then we're gonna jump into it. Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for your love and thank you for the time that we get to spend here under your word. Lord, I look at my life and I'm reminded of all these fire starters, Lord, these influences who have impacted my life in such a big and mighty way for the gospel. And God, now I get to carry the torch and do that and do the same thing. Father, I pray for us here in the building today and whoever might be listening, Lord, I pray you'd really encourage us how we can be fire starters. We love you so much, God. To you be the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I told you about Paul being a fire starter. Can I show you one of the most impactful messages he gave? It comes to us in the book of 2 Timothy. Chapter 1, we're gonna start at the very beginning. And this is what he says. He says, Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus by the will of God, according to the promise of the life that is in Christ Jesus, to Timothy, my beloved child, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and Lord Jesus Christ. All right, so we're jumping into a new book. And whenever you're jumping into a new book, or really whatever kind of passage you're gonna be reading, a really important question is to ask is like, what's happening? Why is it being written? Like, what's the purpose behind it? And so that's what we wanna do. And so when we look back at the context of 2 Timothy, we know that Paul has been traveling around and spreading the gospel. He's been starting fires at all these different places and giving the gospel message to the Gentiles, which is basically anyone who's not a Jew. If anyone does not have Jewish descent, congratulations, you're a Gentile. And we got to hear it. The word spread out from Paul, a major influence in the early church. But along the way, he had a lot of oppression. Bible tells us a lot about the whippings he went through, tells us about the shipwrecks he went through, tells us about the abuse he went through, and the imprisonment he experienced. Now, in 1 Timothy and some of the other letters, he was actually imprisoned by Rome a first time, and it was a little bit more comfy, okay? It was less dungeony, more vacation house, if you will, okay? He's on Long Island. He can have people over. He simply just can't leave. He has to have a Roman guard watch him. But not this time. This time, he's in a dark cell. Think cold, think wet, think uncomfortable. That's where Paul's at when he's writing this letter. And Paul knows in his mind, I'm probably not getting out of it this time. This is probably the end of the road for me. So what he's doing is he's penning his last words to his friend Timothy. Church, if you knew that you only had a short amount of time, let's say next week, what are you saying? If you're gonna be able to write one more letter, if you're gonna be able to make one more social media post, what are you gonna say? Because it's probably not gonna be like your political opinion or your thoughts on that sports team or that player or that family member, or it's probably not gonna be like a lot of that stuff. You're gonna focus on what's important, on the people who are gonna be left behind. And that's exactly what Paul does here. And so he writes to Timothy, and what's kind of the heartbeat behind what he says? Well, if we jump forward to verse 6, he says, for this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gifts of God. See, he knows that Timothy is scared. He sees the oppression going on. He sees the persecution that Christians are facing. And a lot of the other ministers at that time are starting to flake out. Okay, their flame is starting to go down. It's starting to blow out. He knows the oppression, he knows. And so Timothy, he's stuck now in this place of like, oh my word, like, should I quiet down? Should I not be as aggressive? And so picture, church, as Paul's writing this message, and I picture like a little candle next to him, just giving him a little bit of light, and he's watching the flame dance. And he's saying, I can't let Timothy's flame die out. I gotta encourage him. And so that's the purpose behind this letter, is to encourage Paul, to build him up and to fan his flame, to keep going and to press on. And so this is what he writes to Timothy. As he's in his cell penning this letter, this is what he says to encourage him. He says, I thank God for whom I serve, as did my ancestors, with a clear conscience. As I remind you constantly in my prayers, night and day, as I remember your tears, I long to see you, that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. He encourages Timothy in plenty more ways. But what we want to do today, as we look at these first 7 verses, I want to look at how Paul and what he can teach us about inspiring through our influence. If we're called to be influencers, we're called to be fire starters to our communities, to our circle of influences, how do we do that? What are some of the tools? And Paul gives us 6 specific ways how we can encourage and how we can build each other up to fan their flame. So let's break this down verse by verse and kind of look at some of these different ways that he's talking about on how to encourage Timothy. So this is how he starts out. He says, I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors, with a clear conscience. It's cool the way he starts because what he's saying is, hey, just like I've been your influence, my story has a ton of influences too. All the ancestors who've come before me, the Moses, the Noah, the Joseph, they've all influenced my faith. So I get to experience and I get to lead by example because of the example that they left behind for me. But notice he doesn't just say that. He doesn't just camp on the idea that he's leading by example. Look what he says. He says, I thank God whom I serve as I did my ancestors with a clear conscience. What does that mean? Clear conscience. This idea has this idea of purity or not having any guilt. What this is not saying is that Paul is perfect. Absolutely not. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. The Bible is very clear about that. But what he's saying is there's no unconfessed sin in my life, and there's no guilt weighing on my shoulders that's holding me back from the gospel message. See, if you're holding any guilt, any shame, it prevents you from living out the brightest light you can. Because whenever you're going out and whenever you're telling people and whenever you're trying to influence, there's always the voice of Satan whispering in your ear, yeah, you should try. You're not that. You hypocrite. And when we're holding on to unconfessed sin, that's the voice that we hear in our heads. One of the biggest ways that Satan wants to smother influence is the guilt and shame of unconfessed sin. If you know that you're deceitful or you're lying or you're cheating or you hurt somebody and you're holding on to that and it's unconfessed, church, that's just gonna hold you down. It's kind of like having one of these vests, these weighted vests. And these are actually really cool. These weighted vests, go to this next slide for me. These are really cool for like working out, for respiratory, for working on your strength. Because when you put on this weighted vest, you know, it's getting heavy and it's got these slots that you put these weights on. So now you can run a little bit harder and you're building up your strength. And that's what Satan is trying to do with guilt. He's trying to add guilt to your vest. He's trying to weigh down your shoulders. And he's trying to suffocate your influence because of any sin in your life. Church, is there any sin in your life that you need to confess? On the slide prior, it says Psalm 32. David says, I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. You don't have to carry your guilt anymore. Surrender it over to God. So Paul inspires through influence by leading by example with a clear conscience. Leading by example with a clear conscience. And so what next? He says, I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors with a clean conscience, as I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day. As I remember you in my prayers constantly night and day. Imagine how often God heard about Timothy through Paul. Imagine how often, I mean, maybe for you, you've grown up with little siblings, or for you growing up with a toddler right now, and it's just constantly, watch me. Hey, watch me. Hey, mom, look at me. Look what I'm doing. Hey, listen to this story. And you're like, oh my word, if I hear mom one more time, and you're just like, you're going at it, and you're getting annoyed. For God, it's, hey, yes, tell me, come on. Tell me, what do you want? What about Timothy? Oh yeah, I got him. And God is just loving hearing about Timothy. He's loving how often Paul is praying. It's like an open phone line. And just anytime Timothy comes to mind, it's just on the phone like, oh yeah. Encouraging one another in prayer, praying persistently. And Paul knows how effective this is because what he's doing is submitting and he's acknowledging God's power in the spreading of the gospel. You know, because our efforts, church, if we're trying without God's strength, means nothing. It means nothing. If God's not behind it, and if you're not bringing God into the equation and asking for his help and his strength, it means nothing. So Paul knows how much he needs God in this. Paul shows us that fire starters encourage others through prayer and share. Prayer and share. Okay, I know you guys have heard of Care and Share, right? The thrift shop. We're actually getting a new thrift shop right down the street in a little bit. We're very excited about it. But this idea of prayer and share, the idea of how people praying for us and uplifting us, how much of an impact that has on our faith and how that starts a fire. You ever get stopped in the hall or you get like a text in the morning and it's like, hey, I just wanna let you know, I'm praying for you. How encouraging that is. I like that verse in James 5. It says, the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. I think there's a little bit of a misconception when it comes to prayer that it really doesn't do much. Like there's not really, why pray if it's not gonna work? So we can imagine that God's will is kind of like granite, okay? Think of it like chiseled in stone, and it's just there. And when I pray, it's just kind of, boop, it just bounces off. Like it doesn't do anything. Or some people on the other side of it, we think, okay, well my prayer is the reason why it's happening. And so for us, we think, oh, maybe prayer is like directing God's will. Like we kind of adjust God's will because of our prayer, which that's also a misconception. Instead, prayer is this really awesome working of our prayer in tandem with God's sovereignty to perform his will. It's an awesome mystery. The Bible tells us the prayer of a righteous person has great power. It's the two working in tandem. I can tell you so many stories of people who have influenced me through their prayer, and I've felt that all my upbringing. And there's power. I've learned how much power there is in a prayer warrior based on the power of prayer. Now I put some more weathered hands on this image for a reason, okay? That's for this older generation. You older generation, you guys do such an amazing job with encouraging that way. I remember a dear saint in our church, Margaret, and she would be walking around in her later years, her fourth quarter, and she's walking around and she's walking with her walker, and she would see me, and every time she saw me, you know what she'd say? She said, Brad, I'm praying for you. Every time, like without fail, she would tell me how much she's praying for me and how much that encouraged me. I have a grandma and a grandpa that when I was young, I would sneak into their house at night as they're doing their devotions, and I hear them praying. And their prayer list, like flat, okay, was a thick boy of prayer requests. So many prayer requests, and I knew I was in there. And as I'm sneaking in and trying to be quiet to open the freezer to get the ice cream out and be quiet so they don't hear me, I know that they're praying for me and how encouraging that is. I have a mom and dad who pray for me every Wednesday, and they text me and they say, Brad, we know you're about to speak. We love you, we're praying for you. And how encouraging that is to me. So the second way Paul tells us we can lead with influence is praying persistently. There's power in the prayer of a righteous person. So then Paul continues, he says this, he says, as I remember your tears, I long to see you that I may be filled with joy. So what's he saying here? That sounds like a little bit confusing, right? This a lot sounds like, when we read it, that Paul really needs Timothy to visit him. And there's very much a case for that, where Paul is in his prison alone, cold, and he could really glean from the presence of his good friend. But there's also this idea, church, that Paul is actually saying that, I think, Timothy, you could heavily be influenced and supported and encouraged by my presence. Because I imagine as Paul's writing this, he remembers the moment on the beach, speaking and with the ship that he's about to leave in behind him. And he's saying goodbye to his dear friends. And as he's writing it, he can see the tears in Timothy's eyes. This was their fire starter. This is the guy that they drew courage from, that he was bold because of that. He had the answers. If he'd had a question, it was like, Paul, what do I do in this situation? Oh, no problem. We're gonna do this, 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 and this. Oh, yeah. He's the one who gave them courage, and now he's about to leave. And how alone Timothy might have felt in that moment, and the tears. Church, one of the number one ways we can have influence on those around us is simply by being present. Don't underestimate the power of just showing up. Your presence means everything, especially to a teenager. Okay, teens in the room, how many of you guys have ever had a game and you thought dad was working a little bit late tonight? And so during your game, you're on the field and like you're playing and you look over and who's over? Is that dad? And you see him in the corner and his presence gives you so much courage. How many of you have ever been in a state where you needed somebody, you needed a friend, you needed that encouraging word, and they showed up, uninvited even, and they showed up, and how much encouragement that gave you? There is so much power in just showing up and being present. So that's something we tell our small group leaders. I think one of the big reasons why we don't speak up or we don't show up all the time is because we don't think we have all the answers. I don't have the right thing to say. I'm not a pro at the Bible. I don't have I've never experienced that. What am I even supposed to say? Something we love to tell them is, the kids, they don't always remember what you say. In fact, they often probably don't remember what you say, but what they do remember is how you made them feel. And there's power in the showing up, the being present, helping them know how important they are, how special they are, how loved they are, simply by you being there. When I was a kid, I used to love to play sports. Okay, I'm a Deep Run alumni. Okay, loved my Deep Run sports. And as you can see, that was a cutie, okay? That is a cute kid. Just to glow for a second, amen. God, you did good stuff. So I used to love to play baseball. And I remember playing on the Deep Run Pirates. And I remember this one lady worker at it was Kids Club at the time, not Kids Town. That's how old I am. Ugh. So she was there, and I remember giving her a call because I wanted her to show to the game. I wanted to show her. I wanted her to be there. So I called her up, and I did. I left a voice message which sounded very childish and not like, oh, take this road and make a left. It was like, I think I'm on this field and it's around the corner. I was trying to tell where. It probably sounded terrible, but I left that voicemail and then I went to my game. And then there she was. She showed up. She made me feel special, loved. Because mom and dad, they're supposed to go to the game, right? That's their job. Sister, she might not like to be there, but at least she's kind of there. She's on her phone or whatever now. But to have someone outside the church, outside your family, show me how important I am, that does something. And that's the reason why I remember that all these years later, just because of how special she made me feel in that moment. There is power, church, to just being present and encouraging someone through just showing up. Because it's not always what you say. Although, like Paul's gonna show us, there is power to what you say as well. He says this, he says, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that once dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you. I'm reminded of your sincere faith. I see two things in this verse. Number one, he's affirming what he sees in Paul. What he sees in Timothy. He's affirming what he sees. He says, hey, I know your faith is authentic. I know it's genuine because of what you're doing. I see it. I've seen how long we've worked together. I see how genuine it is. Keep going at it. And he's affirming this in Timothy's life. And something that really, a tool that Satan will try to use, especially in a teenager's life, something that he'll try to smother their flame with, is criticism. This is something that teens can struggle with all the time. Teachers at school, coaches, friends groups, social media. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You will never make it on this team. You know what's wrong with this generation? This is what they hear. And every time they get a little bit more of that, it's Satan just dumping a little bit more water on their fire and suffocating it. Church, there is power. There's power to your words. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt talk come out of your mouths, but only such that is good for building up as fits the occasion, that it might give grace to those who hear. This is why fire starters fuel the flame through affirmation. Sometimes it's, hey, I love seeing the joy of the Lord in you. I love seeing how courageous you are. I love seeing how patient you are with your little sibling. Holy cow, if I had to live with that, that would be crazy. I see how patient you are. I love that. And affirming those things in our life and how encouraging that is. I remember being over at a friend's house, my friend Artie, and after a Bible study, his dad who's putting away dishes. He was like, hey, I see a lot of really good in you. I see a lot of really leadership qualities. I could definitely see you working in church before I even began maybe even thinking about working in a church. and he affirmed me, and he showed me, oh, there is something in helping to light that flame. So church, another way that we can inspire through our influence is by affirming those godly qualities, by affirming what we see in their life, and by encouraging them, by building them up, rather than criticizing. You know, I've even had this type of conversation with a kid before where, you know, it needs to be more corrective. So yes, the how they're living right now is not how I would like them to be living. But what you can do is you can point out something good. You say, hey, I see a lot of leadership qualities in you. I see how the other guys are influenced by what you think, what you say. They follow your lead. What if we use that influence for good? And inspiring through that, rather than just criticizing and pointing out a problem. There's power to affirming. And not only this, but what's really cool, Paul, what he's doing is he's calling back to Timothy's roots. He says, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, the faith that dwelt first in your grandmother, Lois, and your mother, Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. Paul is calling back to where it started. He's calling back to the roots of home. As I think about my life, I am the product of the same exact treatment. I've grown up in a Christian family my whole life. My parents are saved, my grandparents are saved. Pretty much a lot of my extended family is saved. So I've been very gifted and blessed in that sense. And so for me, I've grown up hearing about Jesus, coming to church. Whenever the doors were open, I was pretty much here. And it was these women in Timothy's life who helped encourage and spark his flame to follow after Christ. This shows just how impactful our parents are. And mothers, we're gonna take a second, we're gonna gloat on you a little bit. There is powerful influence in a mother. You are one of the earliest influences in your kids. You're one of the earliest ones who gets to show them how loved they are, how cared for they are, how dearly appreciated they are. And you get to be that to them. You get to be that early spark. You get to play a role in that. For many years, I've had people igniting my spark. I had a grandmother who showed joy through her trials and her circumstances. She fanned my flame in that way. I have a mom who is a servant's heart, always putting others before her own needs and wants. And that was leading by example, what I got to see. And they prayed for me and they loved me. And I'm so, so grateful for my parents, for my grandparents, my grandma, my mom. Proverbs 31:30 says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. There's powerful influence in a mom. But really quick, I know that's not everybody in this room though. Not all of you have grown up with that same kind of influence. Maybe for you, you're the first Christian in your family. You're the first follower of Jesus and no one else really gives a rip about what's going on. Church, God has maybe given you the opportunity to be the spark. He's given you the opportunity to light that flame in your family. How could God use you to start that influence, to start that fire, to spread that fire and the gospel to your family? You are not alone. You have a great cloud of witnesses around you, as the Bible tells us in Hebrews 12. 1 Peter 2:12 says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of his visiting us. Your life can be that initial spark to your family. So Paul encourages us continually by saying, recalling his roots. He's recalling his mom, where it all started. And he's saying, look there, look at the faith that started there. Continue that. Live in that, be encouraged by that. And then finally, Paul says this. He says, for this reason, I remind you to fan and flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Paul knows that Timothy is scared. He knows he's timid. He knows a lot of the other guys are starting to flake out and burn out. And so he's telling Timothy, he says, I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. I know there's gonna be persecution. I know not everyone's gonna like you. But the gospel is way too important. It's way too important of a flame to be put out. And so what he's doing is he's motivating. He's motivating Timothy through his fears, through his challenges, and he's saying, I'm here with you. I got this. You got it. Go pass that torch. Go fan the flame. In middle school, we're learning the one another's right now. And one of the one another's that we just went through is spur on one another. Spur on one another toward love and good deeds. This is the idea of motivating or inspiring people. Just like how a cowboy has the cool spurs on his shoes and he inspires his horse to let's go, with the spurs. That's what we should be doing too, to our influences around us, to the people we get to influence. Spur them on, motivate them, encourage them to keep letting their light shine when it's hard. Maybe when we don't feel like it, when we're starting to get a little bit lazy or we're starting to slip a little bit. Encourage them back on by spurring them on. So church, we get to see these 6 different ways that Paul inspires us through his influence. Number 1, leading with a clear conscience and not having any guilt tie him down. We have praying persistently and the power that prayer has in our life. We have affirming godly qualities and showing him all the things in his life that are good, that he needs to keep building up, recalling their roots, motivating through difficulty. All these ways that Paul is encouraging Timothy to keep going, this fire starter in Timothy's life. Well, we just witnessed one of the greatest fire starters I think we see in the Bible, in the New Testament. And he uses his final letter to encourage and fan the flame for Timothy to carry the torch. And so church, we have that same challenge for us today. If you're a Christian in here, you're called to be a fire starter. Now, no, your influence, it's for a lot of people, it's not the stage, okay? This is not everybody's circle of influence. Everyone's circle of influence is not 1,000 followers on Instagram. That's okay. God doesn't love the people on stage more than he loves the people in the audience, no way. And so he inspires us. Hey, your circle of influence, the people I've put around you, whether that's the 3 kids, whether that's your dorm mate, your roommate, your family, your circle of friends, your class, wherever I have you right now, how can you be a fire starter? How can you kindle that fire? Well, this morning, I want to give you just 3 quick fire starter dynamics. How we can play a role in starting someone's fire. How we can encourage those around us, how we can build them up. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about these 3 dynamics. And the first one we wanna talk about, I actually have some props here. Let me go grab these. We like props here. All right, so, gotta find this first one. Small. Boom. This first one we can be. How can we be a fire starter? 1, by being the spark. Looks like I'm running out. I was playing with this last night, so I think I might have run out of, run out of fuel. One of the best ways that we can be a fire starter to those around us is simply by being the spark. Light it up. It's like building the fire. Just like building a fire, just like when I'm on the beach, just like when they're putting the kindling all there and they're putting the logs and they're trying to start that flame. It takes patience, right? It doesn't always catch automatically. It takes some persistence and consistency. It takes intentionality to put it in the right spot, protecting the flame, so that way you could start that fire. That's the way that we get to start the fire in other people. What does that mean for us though? Like, okay, spark, cool. What does that mean? Psalm 78 says, we will not hide them from their descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done. This is the verse that we used on the back of our leaders' sweatshirts that we gave out a couple months ago. Because why? We're encouraging them to help ignite the flame, light it up in their kids. Be that initial spark. So how do we do this? What are some examples? Well, here we go. How can I be the spark? Number 1, talk about your faith at home. Moms, dads, this is an easy one. Make God part of your conversation. Don't just make it like a Sunday thing or you're coming back from youth group and it's like, what did you learn, sweetie? And then it's kind of it. Make God a part of your everyday talk. Bring him into your conversations, bring him into your decisions. Let that lead by example for your kids. Share your own experience. Something that I tell the kids is that one of the best ways you share your faith is simply through your own stories. When you're at school and you're talking to your friends and they ask you what you did that weekend, maybe you talk about how, hey, I went to church and we're learning about this, and telling your own experience. Maybe it's hey, you know, my grandma's really been struggling. She's been really sick and in and out of the hospital. I've been praying and asking God for help, and this is how he's showing up. This is how God's been working in my life. And when you share your own experiences, that's one of the best ways you can spread the gospel. We do that by inviting to church, leading by example, asking for prayer requests, modeling the fruit of the Spirit. These are all ways that we're there at the flame and we're lighting that spark, intentionally caring for our kids. So first of all, actually before we move on, sorry about that, can we go back for 1 second? Developing a firsthand faith. There are 3 types of faith that we really try to implement in our kids before they end up graduating, before they end up going off and flying the coop, right? 3 types of faith we really want to develop in them, and one of them is a firsthand faith. Firsthand faith is this idea of them taking ownership of what they believe. No longer just being mom and dad's faith, but really taking it on for myself and it being my own. And one of the ways you can help be that spark is by living that example, being that light, sparking that flame to help them see what it actually looks like to follow Jesus. What does it mean to actually follow Jesus? Oh, you're doing your devotions, you're praying. Oh, you're going out and you're serving. That's what it looks like to follow Jesus. That's taking a firsthand faith. So number 1, we have be the spark, light it up. How can you be the spark in someone's life? Someone who you know is not saved yet, how can you be that spark to them? And then number 2, we have the flame and keeping it fueled. You know, my cousin, he came over here with his gas can, right? And he comes over and I'm watching and he's dumping it on the fire. And he called it his magic salt water, right? That he's dumping on his fire. And he was using fuel. Why? Because the fire was having trouble starting. It was having trouble keeping a flame, and it must have been going out. He needed support. He needed fuel. And in the same way, the world is trying to suffocate our teenagers. Any amount of faith that they have, the world is just trying to suffocate their flame, put it out, and help them to blend in with the world. Because that's all they're trying to do is survive. They're in survival mode in school. So what we can do is we can come alongside them. We can dump fuel on their fire. We could build them into a bonfire for Christ. Get them on fire. So that way, they would be willing to spread that gospel and spread that flame. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. That's the way we fuel. That's the way we build up, is by encouraging. Not criticizing. No, they're not always gonna be perfect, okay? Believe me, I get it. On a Wednesday night, they are not perfect. But we can still love them, and we can still show them the right thing to do. We can still encourage them. So how do we do that? Number 1, send an encouraging text. For any of our later in stage people in the room here, if you're a grandpa or a grandma with a phone, you're a cool grandpa, okay? You're sick. You can send a text message to your grandkids. It's way different than it used to be now, back in the day of like phone calls. Ooh, what's a phone call? Teens don't even know what that is, okay? They either know FaceTime or they know texting. And if you can text your grandkid and be like, hey, just want to let you know I prayed for you today. I love you. You got this. Oh, man, the encouragement you get from that. What about show up without even being asked? Showing up to a game, showing up in a time of struggle, showing up with an encouraging word. Maybe it's not the perfect word, and that's okay, but showing up for them and showing that you care. Speaking words of affirmation to them. I actually jumped over probably one of the most important ones for today. Telling your mom you love her, okay, teens? Lock eyes with me right now. Tell your mom you love her. You probably haven't said it in like 2 months, okay, and your mom's feeling burnt out and feeling like she doesn't care. Tell her today, okay? Yes, we got this. Speaking words of affirmation is pointing out the good things in their life, how they're growing, the positive elements you see, and how they can use those for Christ's glory. motivating them to persevere. Continue helping them motivate. Hey, I see the struggle. I know you're going through this. You're not alone. You got this. We're here for you. And motivating them, putting fuel on their fire. And finally, praying for them and telling them. I told you about firsthand faith. Firsthand faith is the first kind of faith we're trying to develop in our kids, this ownership. This second one is a remarkable faith. And see, a remarkable faith is helping that faith go from just up here of like, hey, I take ownership of this and like, I know my faith is my own, to now, let's live it out, to shine it, to be a bright light to those around them. This looks like implementing habits and disciplines in their life, things that you guys can model for them, ways that they can not just have a faith, not just be a Christian, right? Not just be a Christian by name, but actually be a follower of Jesus. Being a flame. So we have number one, we got the being the spark. So we want to be the initial spark. How can we light someone's fire for the first time and help them with salvation? How can we fuel their fire? How can we fuel and encourage them, fan their flame? And then finally, number three, we can pass it on. We can pass the torch. We've got this sweet torch here. We've got someone here at church who is incredibly crafty. And I mean, and this is the flame we got, right? This is the fire we got. And so we're there, we're sparking the flame and we help ignite their fire. And then we're dumping fuel on the fire and we're helping it grow and we're helping them make their faith their own. And then what do we say? Take the torch now. Go start some fires of your own. Spread that passion. Spread the gospel. Spread God's love to the people in your class, to your teammates, to your little siblings, to your children. Be the person to pass that torch. Go start some fires. Church, we're not here forever. Paul knew his time was very limited. If you knew that your time was up next week, how would that influence how you use your impact? How would it influence how you see yourself as a fire starter? Matthew 5:16, in the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. As we close up here, I want to tell you a really quick story that has to deal with torches, and it has to do with Ireland way back in the 1800s, and it goes just something like this. It says, as a boy, Robert Louis Stevenson was not healthy. One cold night, as he stared out his bedroom window, his nurse told him to come away from the cold glass. He didn't listen, but he kept watching intently as a lamplighter moved down the street outside, lighting lampstands along the way. Stevenson reportedly exclaimed, "See, look, there's a man poking holes in the darkness." That's exactly what we're doing. Is we're taking the fire that God lit in us. We're taking the flame that he started, and through the very faithful service of those around us, fanning our flame, we're now taking our fire and we're gonna pass it on and say, now you go start some fires. Church, we are all called in this room. If you're a child of God, you're called to be a fire starter. You're called to be an influencer. How are you gonna use that influence? Who is a person in your life who you can help spark that flame? Who's a person in your life you know you can encourage with your words, with your presence? Who's someone you can say, pass that torch, go start some more? Church, I am so grateful for this church. I've grown up here. I am a product of faithful serving. I'm the faithful product of June and Frank, Janet and Lee, Mark, Dave, John, Kyle, Gabe, Margaret praying for me. I mean, I could go down the list. And I can tell you that I stand here, one, because of the faithfulness of Jesus, first and foremost. He's the one who opened my eyes to the need of salvation. But number two, a lot of very faithful people in my life fanning my flame. And church, I want to encourage you to do that with the next generation. There are people who need our encouragement, who need our passion, who need our love and support. And I want to encourage you this week, whose fire can you start?